everyone. Our next guest is an author and advocate dedicated to helping LGBTQ+ refugees find safe passage to Canada. In his memoir, he details his own journey from Syria to Vancouver.
The book is called Crooked Teeth, a queer Syrian refugee memoir, and author Danny Ramadan joins us on the show today. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Danny, it's such a pleasure to have you here, but I want to start off with this question. You say that the refugee experience is often oversimplified. So how did you want to correct that with this book that you've written?
I think that when we think about the refugee experience, we think of it as if it's a flood. We talk about flood of refugees, a stream of refugees. It cannot be any further from the truth because refugees are individuals. We are completely different. Myself, as a person with a refugee background, a queer Syrian man, have very little in common with a refugee, say, who's a single mother from an African nation. So it's just so different, and our needs, our aspirations, our hopes and desires are completely different. So I think that what I'm hoping to do with this book is to give you an idea of who I am as an individual, and therefore maybe let you see that refugees are not a homogenous culture.
Yeah, humanize refugees.
Exactly, indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Well, you write about growing up in Syria and coming into your queerness in a country where that is criminalized.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that your home, and I assume part of which you loved a great deal, was not safe for you?
It's a very complicated answer for me, to be honest, because I grew up in Damascus, right? And Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. It's 6,000 years old. And you can tell the street smell of jasmine, the houses lean onto one another. It is such a beautiful place to grow up in. It's a place where I kissed a boy for the first time. It's the place where I climbed a tree for the first time. But at the same time, the culture, the law, the religion, they are all telling me that homosexuality is bad. I grew up with my mother, who has mental health issues. She passed away a couple of years ago, and when I was young, she was an abusive person. And I will say that, yes, I feared my mother, but at the same time, I had a lot of love for her because at the end of the day, she's my mother. And I have the same connection to Syria as well. It feels like I have this beautiful mother that I really care for, but at the same time, I'm haunted by.
Complicated relationship.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
So you draw a lot of parallels between the underground LGBTQ+ communities in Damascus and those here also in the West. So what do you think might surprise people about the similarities?
Okay, so here's the thing. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. You know how drag queens have their siblings in the drag community, and then they take in new drag queens and call them their daughters, and drag queens will have their mothers. It's like a family system of sorts. So Syria has the same exact system. I grew up with, when I was 18, a trans woman took me in from the Syrian underground queer community, and she's the one who took me in, and I was one of her daughters, basically. And introduced me to my siblings in the queer community. She can follow her lineage in this spiritual family of sorts all the way back to the 1920s. It is intense for me because I don't think somebody just took an airplane, I don't know, and flew all the way from Chicago to Damascus to teach us this. I just think that queerness is seeking what is missing, and we miss that family system. We miss that connection, that blood connection. So we created it for ourselves, and I think we do this across the world. It's a pleasure, it's an honor that I'm part of that system back in Syria, and it's beautiful to see it replicated here in the West.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful. All right, so even within queer spaces, there's always a risk of running into someone. So, and you were outed this way when you were living in Egypt. So what were the repercussions when you were found out?
I was 22, and I was outed by a fellow queer person at my job back in Egypt. And it is very sad to me because I felt that that person, because of the society around us, felt that the only way that he can protect himself was to out me. Before I have the chance to out them, right? And I'll tell you, back then, I was 22. I had a lot of bitterness about it. It took a couple of years for me to put my life back together, find a different job. I struggled quite a lot because of it. But mature me, this 40-year-old person in front of you, looks back at this and feels a lot of pity for that person. Feels a lot of pity that the only way that they can feel safe because of the society around them, that homophobia that is ingrained within them. The only way they could feel safe was to out me, and I'm sad for them. I really am.
Yeah.
Danny, what made you eventually decide to relocate here to Canada?
I went back to Syria from living in Egypt for a while during the Arab Spring, which turned in Syria into a civil war. And during that time, I had a community, right? Like, I had the same community I talked about before. I opened my house for queer and trans people to hang out in Damascus. And then I think I got arrested for it. I got arrested by the Syrian regime in May 2012, almost 12 years ago. And 6 weeks later, I was released. And when I was released, I was afraid that I might be rearrested. So I left the country and I became a refugee.
They never explained to you why you were thrown in this.
tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't explain it to you?
No, well, why would they? There's no system in which they're held accountable for holding me, right? So I was never explained. I did not know, is it my journalism? I worked as a journalist at the time. Is it the queer places that I was navigating? And I was afraid that I might be arrested. So I left the country and I became a refugee in Lebanon.
Wow. Which eventually led to you relocating into Canada. And you now live happily in Vancouver.
I do.
But you have said that the first year in Canada was one of the worst years of your life.
Yeah.
Talk about that transition and why it was so heartbreaking at the beginning.
I think it is, when it comes to refugee stories, we think of them to end at the airport. The refugee has arrived to safety. That is the end of the story, which cannot also be furthest from the truth. A refugee arriving into a new place might have left behind homophobia and civil war, but they also left behind their community. I left my friends, my family, the market where I used to buy my favorite candy. Anything that is familiar to me, I left behind. So readjusting into a place that was very foreign to me. The only knowledge that I had about living in a North American society comes from watching Friends. So
it's a little different than that.
It is. Yeah. People are not as quick-witted over there.
No, they're not.
You try, but
It's true.
no.
Yeah.
And those massive apartments, it's a completely different experience. So I struggled quite a lot to understand the society, to understand the social cues. Canadians and Syrians, we don't even just speak different languages, we speak different social cues, right? So it took a lot of adjustment to learn about how to become Canadian, how to be part of the Canadian society.
That's something that we don't even think about. But now I'm thinking about your journey as you're explaining your story. And I think about the 22-year-old you who was outed by a friend. Now you're living in Vancouver, you're married, your husband, Matthew.
Yes.
You're a pillar in the LGBTQ community. So what brings you joy today?
My dogs. Look at that guy. He's named Freddie Mercury after. Of course. Yes. Gosh. The beauty, honestly, that's a funny answer, but the truth is I'm married to the man of my dreams. He's originally from Saskatchewan, and he's such a Canadian boy. I am surrounded by a family of beautiful folks that I am so honored to call my friends. I am successful in my career. I just released this book that is trying to tell a good story. So I'm in a good place. I'm proud of where I am.
We love that.
Danny, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story here with us today. Feel very proud. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, Crooked Teeth is available everywhere now, and to the lucky members of our studio audience, you're all going home with your own signed copy today. Isn't that nice? We'll be right back. Hey there, what did you think? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find more on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. See you soon.